How's it going? I'm having issues with the system again. Something's weird with the SharePlay, the sharing of this external monitor. So you're all on the tiny screen again, and I've blown the text up to old man proportions so I can see what's going on. So happy Mother's Day for those of you who are celebrating Mother's Day today. I know some people celebrated it earlier in the month, and maybe some not at all, but that's okay. My wife, I almost said my mother. Whoa, Freudian slip there. My wife was kind enough to let me stream today. So I spent most of yesterday and this morning doing planting in the garden and going garden shopping and basically doing good husband point earning things. So we're free for this block of time and a little bit afterwards. So hey, welcome to Synth Seeker. My name's Luke. Who's here today? Let's see. Rich and Anna, Helical Coil. Greetings, everyone. Let's see who else. Karen, Andy. Let's see. Those are the usual suspects. And Jeff. Hey, guys. All right. So today was going to be vaguely instructional because Audrey asked some questions, and I don't see him here yet, so we'll get around to it. But I was going to do some Berlin School build stuff up, and really just sort of be more instructive today. So we'll make some noise. Jonathan Carter, hey there. And so he has some questions that I wanted to elaborate upon, and they were things like, how do I select voices and patches? Like, what are my goals and things like that. So we'll talk about these sounds. I've kept the same sounds from last week because those ones were thought out, and I was busy doing Mother's Day things this morning, so I didn't have time to reset the sounds and stuff. But we'll talk about those. Let's see. How do I define classic Berlin School? Because like last week I said, let's do a classic pattern. And then I did something and he was like, other people were like, what makes that classic? There is no canonical Berlin School set of rules that say this is what Berlin School is. But if you want to sound like some of the classic Berlin School beds that you hear from various artists, there's some tips I can give you for how to do that. So we'll do that today. And let's see. There was a question about odd pattern lengths and the creative application of dissonance. So we'll talk about that. Just basically some very beginners friendly things like if you're playing two notes and they're dissonant, how do you make them be less dissonant, but you still want to play those two notes for whatever reason, right? It hurts when I stick my finger in my eye. Well, don't do that, right? But maybe you need to. So we can talk about that. So questions about lead lines. I'll talk about playing on a grid as far as leads are concerned, and noodling embellishments. I use the phrase a lot, noodling, and I use the word embellishments. What do I mean when I say that? So that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, sound okay? So I'll try and watch the chat in its tiny, tiny vision mode. So we're here. Trying to think what news has happened since last week. I broke down and bought another synth. It'll be here Tuesday, so you'll see it next weekend. But, what else? Really, that's about it. I don't think I'm going to go to KnobCon this year. I went last year, had a great time. I was thinking about going to it this year. For those of you who are overseas, KnobCon's a synth convention in Chicago, the Chicago area, the middle of the U.S. Technically, it's in this little town, Schaumburg, just south of Chicago, but it's effectively you're going to Chicago. But I'm not going to go this year. I got too much going on, and I would like to take my wife next time I go. So the added expense, if I hadn't just bought a synth, I could have bought her a ticket, but I don't know. It might change at the last minute, but I don't think I'm going to be going. So, but it's fun. If you get a chance, definitely go. Let's see. Who's here? Enzo Adrian, hey. The Messiaen scale. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I never used that one. But yeah, I mean, all scales have dissonance in them, right? But that one has more. Oh, so allegedly, says you. Oh, I could pull it up, but I'm not going to right now. Let's see. Who else just popped in? The Wookiee, hey there. And Wine Rubber Garden. Welcome. I think you're new. Or if you're not, I don't remember your handle. So welcome back. And there is our friend Biscuit, HGHB. So Biscuit's much easier to remember. So, and I Sing the Body Electric. Hey, man. Let's see. You're doing background listening. That's fine. We're going to be doing some instructional stuff today. All right. So let's just jump right in. Let's kill some patterns here. All right. So let's start at the top of the list. Voices. All right. So today's voices are the same as last week's voices. I'm just going to touch on them really quick. Got a lot of plucks. I've got 4 plucks, a pad, a bass, and a lead. That's what we're using today. So the plucks are this wooden pluck. Okay. I like to use plucks in Berlin School because I like to apply a delay behind it and then some reverb. The delay for this instrument is a delay that's actually reversing the audio echoes. Right. So if you can get software that does that. I'm using a thing called an object filter from, who is this from? I think it's from AAS, Applied Acoustic Systems. I think it's Applied Acoustic Systems, AAS. But you can do this like a Mood Mark II pedal or Mood pedal, lots of things. The Microcosm pedal, you can get lots of stuff that do that, right? So let's see. Hey, Homegrown, welcome aboard. We're doing the great naming. Everyone's signaling each other. The guy saw music as colors and textures, and his theory of modes was limited transposition of what is info. Are we talking about the Messiaen scale? All right. Chow Matrix can reverse the delay as well. Oh, yeah, and it's free. Great. Right. So, Leander to, oh my God. How do we pronounce that? Leander Bijnagel? Yeah, I know. You're LB for today. Welcome aboard. Anyway, so we've got this wooden pluck. Okay. And what is that? That's an ESQ1. I'm going down this like path of researching ensonic synths, and that's an ESQ1. I'm having a good time with that. Then we've got this bell pluck. It's like a carillon or like tubular bells. We'll do a little Mike Oldfield. Then we've got a string pluck. This is a sawtooth-based pluck from Prophet 12. But all my plucks are basically the same. They've got a delay behind them that's either a dotted eighth, an eighth, or a 16th delay. But play with all the times. If you have a delay that you can't sync to MIDI clock or sync to tempo, that's actually good. So very slowly turn the delay time as you've got a pattern running, and you will find lots of these really fun sort of syncopated in between places. So I am, for convenience, syncing my delays to the clock, but honestly, the classic stuff, they didn't have that, right? And they dialed it in, and sometimes they would dial it in intentionally off just a bit, and so things would shift over time. You get phasing of the delays. It's interesting stuff. We've got a dulcimer here. What is this from? It's from the Op6. And things have varying amounts of feedback and reverb. I've got an organ which I didn't actually use last week. I mentioned it. I used to sell organs. And this is like almost like a tone wheel that's kind of muted. Right? That's not like a B3. And then the bass. All right. And then a nice little sawtooth lead coming out of the Cobalt 8. So why do I pick these sounds? Well, I picked them because they're different, very different timbre-wise. Like, so a wooden block, it's like square wave based, it's hollow. right? That has its own sort of space timbre-wise. And a bell, right? Not hollow, kind of not atonal, but the harmonic series from a bell isn't you. It's not harmonic. It's enharmonic, meaning it's got overtones that are outside the normal harmonic series, and that gives a bell its sound. So the harmonic sort of timbre of a bell is significantly different than that of a wood block, even though it's the same pitch. So I try and pick plucks that have different timbres, right? So the string pluck, it's muted if I play a little harder. Right? So a sawtooth pluck like that, again, has sort of a full harmonic series where the wood block is a square wave based, it's hollow. In the string, it's sort of fuller, richer. I won't say richer, but it is a full spectrum sort of sound. And then the dulcimer is a plucked, so it's coming off the op 6. It is a plucked sound that's sort of string based, like there's a car plus strong sort of algorithm thing going on there, where as the string is vibrating, and what it really is one pluck with a whole bunch of echoes piled up after it, really fast echoes. So it gives you that string vibrating sound. And those echoes are having a filter close on them, and that's what gives us a plucked string sort of sound. Right. So those four sounds they all have their own sort of space in the sort of frequency spectrum and timbre harmonic domain. I'm not coming up with the words I want here, but I picked them specifically because while they're the same pitch, they have very distinct timbres, so you can hear them over each other. So if I've got a bed running with 4 patterns playing, I can move them, I can modulate them from a timbre perspective, bring them in and out from a volume perspective. Use the mod wheel or use velocity to modulate their timbres, or just use an LFO to do something like that. And so as they're moving, the sum of all their harmonics is interesting to your ear and changes over time in a way that doesn't necessarily get boring. That's why I pick those sounds. Okay. Homegrown, that is the best bass sample on YouTube. Thank you, Homegrown. Let's see. Am I missing anything? Oh, Audrey's here. So Audrey, we're answering some of the questions you asked. So we were talking about why do we pick the pattern, the timbres I pick. And then I want a pad of some kind. And I get tired of, lately I've been getting tired of pads that are based on wavetables that are like crazy, huge timbre shifts. It starts to fatigue my ears. So I wanted a pad that was soft, like occupying a very narrow amount of the frequency sort of harmonic range. But I've got an LFO running there that's doing a rhythmic cycle that's not in time with the MIDI clock. Right? Because then when that's laid over things that are playing in time with the clock, it adds more interest. All right? And the bass is the bass. And the lead is I like sort of muted leads. So use velocity to make them sharper. One thing I turn off on the leads is a lot of time your synth leads will be velocity sensitive, where the velocity impacts the volume, like the amplitude, the amp envelope. And I turn that off usually because I want my leads, it's a form of compression, right? I want it to be compressed. I want it to always be sort of the same volume. So I tend to turn off velocity mappings to amplitude or amp envelope. So when I hit this softly, it's still the same volume. It's just the filter's muted. It's not necessarily louder when I hit it harder. It's just brighter. All right. So that's my point. Tim Burgess, hey, welcome. Anyway, so that's why we make the sound selections we make. I want them all to have their own harmonic space. So when we lay them together, it doesn't sound like a mess. Although a lot of times when I lay a bunch of things together, it sounds like a mess, but that just comes with the territory. So that's practice. Let's see. Next question was, last time I said, let's do a classic Berlin School jam, or let's do a classic pattern. So what do I mean when I mean a classic pattern? I generally mean, hang on a second. I generally mean a 1-bar pattern, a really short pattern, because back in the olden days, they had tiny short sequencers, right? Their sequencers were 4 steps, 5 steps, 8 steps, right? They didn't have 64-step sequencers, back in the 70s, or if they did, I mean, they did, but you had to chain them together or whatever. Step sequencer pattern length is sort of like an arms race. And I used to think more is always better, right? 64 steps. If you're looking at like synthesizers and you're going to buy something, it's on the spec sheet, step sequencer, 64 steps, 128 steps, right? For what I do here, and certainly in Berlin School, 4, all you need is 4, right? Or 3 even you can get away with, or 2. But we'll start, when I say classic Berlin School, I mean a pattern that has a relatively limited pitch selection and a really short length. So I'll do what I did last week, which is this. Let's see, got to clear up my old patterns. Hold on a second. Delete, artist transient. Away it goes. And here we go. All right, so all I did was record 3 notes, and I looped it over and over and again as I was playing, right? And so what I'll do here, if we look at this, all right, ooh, you can't even see that. Hang on, let's see if I can make it a little brighter. On the screen. There we go. I hope that's more easy to see. And I'm going to shorten this pattern down so it sort of more represents the old step sequencers they had back in the day. It's going to sound a little weird here. Let's go to here. All right. So this is simulating a step sequencer that only has 3 steps. Okay. Now, it looks like more in the pattern because that's the way I recorded. It's easy to do. But what's happening is here we're doing 8th notes. We've got a dotted 8th delay. And so that's the beginning of a classic Berlin School pattern. Now let's put something else on it. We'll do another pattern. We'll make this one 1 bar. So this is going to have, instead of only 3 steps, this is going to have 4 steps, or simulate 4 steps. So go here again. All right. So we've got 3 notes playing, but the pattern is 4 notes long. And they're layered on top of each other. And we're going to mix them till they blend. Because that wooden one has a sharp strike and it's comes through a little bit higher, so I'm going to bring it down a little bit. All right. Now we're going to put a 3rd pattern on that. So our patterns here is a pattern of 3, a pattern of 4. Now we'll do a pattern of 5 or 7 or 9. We're going to do an odd-shaped one. let's see. Okay, so I'm going to shorten this to, we'll shorten it to 7. Bring that down. We're going to mix it again so they sort of all blend together. All right, so that's a bed, and that's a classic bed, what I would call it. Now, you can go find lots of classic Berlin School examples that is different from this, but this is me simulating what I remember in my mind's eye of listening to Tangerine Dream and early New Age in the 80s. All right, early 80s. All right. Let me just look at the chat here. So classic Berlin School sequences, short in between 4 to 8 notes. That's my take on it, Audrey. So, and it's not gospel. So when I say classic, you know that's where I'm headed. It's up to you. All right. A question for later. How do you capture an improvised Berlin School jam and turn it into a finished piece? That's a good question. We can talk about that for sure. What's your workflow? And would you choose the good parts and re-record? Yeah, let's stick a pin in that, Mr. Carter, and come back to it. Because it also depends on whether you're working with other people or not, too. So, and Andre says the first of the third one is longer than the other 6 notes. Is it? Oh, yeah, it's a little bit longer. They're all relatively short from a sustained perspective. I mean, I could quantize the lengths if I wanted to, but it doesn't matter. Sonically, I don't think it stands out that much. Anyway, so we've got this running, and it's a bed. All right? And once you have a bed, you can play your melodies over it. Okay. So let's play. And when I say classic Berlin School, generally this sort of bed's running and there's no rhythm. There's no drum part yet. And so the beginning is sort of the downbeat's very fluid, and you can influence what the listener interprets as the downbeat by the patterns you play in your melody, right? So if I play a repeating phrase, melodic phrase, the listener will naturally associate the beginning of that phrase as the downbeat. So now the risk you run, certainly I run, is because there is no beat playing, I will lose track of the downbeat. So my melodies that I write will end up being a little longer than a steady meter of 4 or 8. And so I'll run things over, or I'll run them short. And that's okay. It's just whatever you do in the moment, what moves you. So one thing I'll do to put a foundational steady beat on it is you can put a rhythm part in, which I'll do in a minute, a drum part, or you could put a bass part in there. Now your bass, if it's drones, can be a drone of say 2 bars, and then the note repeats, and that puts a nail on where the downbeat is, and everyone will know all the time. So, hey Tim, fighting a Bluetooth keyboard, that's cool. So let me stick a bass line on here that will pin the downbeat to a particular spot. actually like what I just recorded, so I'm going to delete it and record it again. So that was terrible. Let's try again. That's better. So we bring the bass down a little bit, mix it down. So now I've got that bed running, and the downbeat for the beds is like a lost. It's phasing in and out, it's moving places. But the bass is pinning for the listener, or me, the player, where the downbeats go. And that makes playing a lead on top of it easier to like do something that repeats in a way where repetition legitimizes it, like puts an earworm in there and you sort of get hooked onto it. So, hey, X-Orbital. Here, let me try putting something in here. I've got something. All right. And just to jump back to Jonathan Carter in the whole "what's your workflow?" You're looking at it, right? So what I'll do is I tend not to do jams. I jam with friends, right? This is a new development, but I jam with friends. But when I sit down, I build a bed, put a bass on it, put some melodies over it. And the way I work, I'm using Ableton. It's capturing all of my, it's capturing all of these little patterns here. And I could just keep building up pattern after pattern after pattern. And so that's sort of how I work. So it's not like I'm capturing live audio. I'm actually capturing MIDI. So I can always go back and fix things that I don't like so much, right? And that's my workflow. So if you're a jammer who's recording audio, then yeah, it makes more sense from that perspective to have multiple takes or jam for a really long time and then chop out the parts you like and sort of merge them together or comp them together into a place. So workflow is super personal, and this is mine. So I like synthesizers, right? So I'm sort of inherently MIDI. So the room's full of synths. I've got a brain and a control surface, and I'm basically, if we want to get mystical about it, I'm a wizard who's generating little spells, little clips, and I'm sending them off to make the workers, the synthesizers, animate and be workers, right? Very Mickey Mouse, Magician's Apprentice sort of behavior. That's how I like to work. Okay. Let's see. Can you show the notes of the solo? Oh, yeah, sure. Here, let's see if we can make it a little larger. Right. I hope that's legible. That's basically the full range. And what you'll see is if you look at it, the pattern, there's some repetition / legitimization going on, and that the run is happening 1, 2, 3 times. The fourth time there's sort of a variant that eventually resolves when it starts over at the beginning again. And I will then what I do is when I'm performing or when I'm composing, I rinse and repeat. So I've got a set of patterns, and then I will do a new set of patterns, and then a new set of patterns. And then I may arrange those later, or I may go and change one thing in the pattern, like the bass line. So I could go here to my bass. And I can start, I'll say I'm going to record a different bass line on top of this. All right, so let's do this. All right, whoops, that was a mistake. Oh, that was an even worse mistake. I just deleted the pattern. Undo. So let's put a different bass line on that. Let me noodle a bit. Oh, let's do a Berlin School classic bass line. Really short. All right, one bar, just 16th notes, playing a pattern over and over again. And what I can do is underneath that, I can drone, hit the low notes. So that doesn't work if you're running a monophonic bass line, right? So you got to have a polyphony there so that the upper part can keep playing while you're droning on it underneath. But you could just jump to a different instrument, right? And back to workflow. So this is the pattern I just recorded. I can jump back to the one previously, so I can arrange on the fly. Now we're back to the first pattern. Okay. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Yeah, it's one of the pluses of MIDI, right? But I mean, you know, different strokes for different folks. So, Culture of Ghosts, hey man. Michelle, the ESQ1 and the MS-20 were your first synths you bought as a kid. Nice. I have an ESQ1 behind me, and there's an MS-20 clone over there. I don't actually have an MS-20, but I've got the Behringer clone, the K2, and I like it. I am on a romance with Ensoniq synths right now, so I just bought another Ensoniq synth. It'll be here Tuesday. So, luckily there's only so many, right? Let's see. And Biscuit is getting the urge to play his bass. Pull the bass out, man. You absolutely should. I don't own a bass anymore. I used to. So I'm not going to get into that. But I haven't owned a bass guitar in a long time because I play a grid now. So. All right, that was helpful, Jonathan. Good. All right, cool. Garen, yes, Garen, I did get the SD one. I didn't buy the one from that person in Massachusetts. I bought one from Centaur that they had just restored, so it's like fully restored SD1. I'm really excited about it. So hey, Keith in Watford. All right. Now there were some other questions people had asked. I'm saying people, as though there's like a large body of people asking me questions. I do get a lot of questions and comments, but these all came from one person. You can thank Audrey. He's in the chat right now. Let's see. So we covered mixed pattern lengths. Creative application of dissonance. He didn't actually ask it that way, but he asked about having those notes going. All right, so let's kill these patterns and let me demonstrate something else. So let's do this. We'll go here. All right. So let's find something. Let's use. No. We'll use the string block. Okay, so So I'm in D minor, I think. We're in D minor. Okay. When you're playing, when you're setting a pattern, you're picking the notes. Pick a key. Try and stay within the notes of the key. It's a good way to sound happy, harmonious. Like it'll sound good for whatever your definition of good is. If you like Western style music, do you have to stay in the key? No, of course not. And if you step outside the key, you'll hear people say, oh, I hit a jazz note or a blue note or a wrong note. There are no wrong notes. They're just notes that when you play them in a series or you play them at the same time, some things are going to add tension and some things are going to resolve tension, right? So if I play, there's two notes, right? The brown note, nice. There's two notes. They're an octave apart. They're very, they play nice with each other. I try not to use theory terms because I suck at music theory. So the word is consonant. They sound good together. All right. Another two notes that sound consonant, right? The first note of the scale and the fifth note of the scale, right? That measure of that distance is called a fifth. Fifths are very, very consonant. They sound good, right? That's a power chord. So if you pick up a guitar, you play a fret, you go up two and over one. Right? That shape on a grid looks like that. You're playing fifths, and fifths always sound pretty consonant, right? But if I play two notes right next to each other, that's not necessarily a wrong note. That note's the root note of the scale. It's in the scale. This one's not in the scale. It sounds kind of evil. Right? So if you're playing a melody, you might say that's a wrong note. It's not. It's just outside the scale and it's dissonant. It's adding tension. So what if you want to make a pattern that adds tension? Well, step outside your scale. So if we go back to a quick one bar pattern, here we go. There we go. All right, let's look at that pattern. There we go. All right. So it's an 8-step pattern. It's playing the first and the fifth and an octave. All right. And I want to put in I want to make it sound evil. I want it to be tense, right? I can go add things outside the scale. So we'll add this one here. A little too much velocity. We bring that down a bit. Right, so if this was a film soundtrack, I used to score films a long time ago. Right, this is the bed that would play under the damsel or the heroine is spying on the villain. Something's afoot. Right, that note is outside the scale. It's a wrong note, but all it's really doing is making tension. Right, so if you want to do Berlin School that has an emotional sort of traversal where it starts, sort of spacey and then it gets to a dark place and then it gets to a happy place and, there's some emotional journey you want to take people on, you can change your patterns and start putting things outside the key in there. Now, one thing you can do, I'm going to take that note out. Actually, let me put it back in. One thing you could do, because that note, let's pause for a moment. Because they're right next to each other, they're literally two. If you're playing on a piano keyboard, they're right next to each other. Like a B and a C are right next to each other, or half step away from each other. What you can do to still have some tension, but sort of chill it out a little bit, sort of literally spread it out a bit, is instead of playing this tense note right next to the first note, you bring it up an octave. Same note. It's up an octave, so you can go. It makes a difference. So if I start this pattern playing again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it up an octave. Now it's playing right next to the upper note that's playing at the same time. I'm going to mute that one. It's still tense, but it's not quite so sharp. And because later in the pattern it plays the actual root, it sort of resolves it. So we add tension for a moment and then release it. Add it and release it. It's an option that you can do, right? You can spread things out across the octaves. If you're playing a note, if you've got a pattern and some notes that you've selected don't sound good together, you can delete them, you can move them around so they're in key, or you could try moving them up an octave or 2 octaves, right? And do interesting things with it. There was an example in the Discord server where someone was playing, they were sharing a piece of music they made with us, and they had these low chords playing way down, and they were clusters. They were tightly bunched together notes, and there was definitely tension being added there. There was these notes that were, tightly packed together and dissonant. And it sounded, the piece sounded good, but it was a little distracting. And so what the feedback was to this person was to say, take some of those notes and move them up an octave or maybe 2 and see if you like it. I don't remember whether he ended up doing that or not. But that's one thing you can do when you're stuck and you're like, these notes I've selected, I'm not happy with them. They're too tense. What do I want to do? I don't want to blow the mood. I don't want it to be a happy thing. I want it to be dark for some reason. You could try spreading it out across the registers, right? So, let's see. Trying to stay caught up on the chat. Yeah, Ableton with multiple tracks is very convenient, right? Multiple instruments at once. Let's see. Brown note discussion about Ensonic. Andy's next album will be named Just Jazz. Maybe. Nothing like a bit of dissonance to sweeten the pie. Absolutely. True fact, I put salt in my tea. Not a lot. I like sweet tea with cream. I like chai in the Indian sense. But I also like it with a little salt in it because the salt adds that little off thing that you need. Anyway. Right. This is why I also put cayenne pepper inside my chocolate chip cookies, but arguably that might be for other reasons. So, okay. So that's about dissonance, how to how to mitigate or use dissonance in an interesting way. Lead lines. All right. So let's go back to our pattern that we had running. There we go. All right, I'm just going to start this rolling. And I'm going to get rid of the lead line. And I'm going to get rid of the bass line too. Well, I'll just delete it. I'll just mute it. Okay. So here we have a bed running. All right, classic Berlin School bed. Short patterns, just a few notes. And I've got this lead sound. Bring it up a bit. All right, so it was asked, how do I make my lead lines? The truth is that I make my lead lines via muscle memory. So if you play guitar or bass or any instrument where you, generally monophonic instruments, so a wind instrument or something like that, and you've played it for a while and you feel confident, your muscle memory is probably what you rely on most when you're improvising leads, right? Guitarists would refer to them as licks, right? There are some shapes that you can play on a guitar that are shapes that you've learned over time, right? Hammer on pull off, walking down, a pentatonic scale is a lick. It's something that you don't have to think about. You're not, when I'm looking at the grid and I'm playing, I'm not necessarily always going from a theory perspective, from a melodic harmonic perspective, what notes do I want to pick? A lot of it's just muscle memory. Okay. So like I've got a bed running here in D minor, running. You'll hear me do this. I'm going to shoot myself in the foot here. I'm going to point out to you, and I'm sorry, if I tell you this, you may be at risk of never being able to unhear what it's going to do. And then every time you hear me play, you're going to be like, oh, he's playing that lick again, right? Because I do it. I do root fifth octave runs a lot. I like that as an opening sort of grace note for a lot of notes. So if I want to, let's say I want to play this note as the first note of my melody, I'll run up to it by going like this. I'll do that. That's a muscle memory thing. And then on the grid, these vertical sections that are side by side, if you move up them, you're moving up fourths within the key. And it has a particular sound that I like. And so you'll see me do that little lick and then run up fourths. Right? So you can run in this column on a grid controller and be doing basically major seconds going sideways and fourths going up and down. Right? That's just licks, right? I wasn't thinking about any of those notes. That's muscle memory. Okay. And so what'll happen is I'll let the main notes that I sustain are the pitches that I'm thinking about from a harmonic perspective, and all of the quick in-between notes, the notes as like if I've got a melody that's going to play note here, here, and here to do a visual sort of, I'm going to play these three notes here, here, and here. I'll be thinking about those three notes as they relate to the overall harmony of the piece, but all the little notes in between getting me from here to here and then from here to here, those are all muscle memory licks. Right? So if I want to have a melody that plays, and I see the chat scrolling, I'll come read it in a second. That's the melody I wrote, right? But when I embellish it with licks, it goes from right? If I embellish that, it'll end up being, and watch me screw it up now. Right? So the only notes I was thinking about there is, and you can think of those if you're playing a grid, and I think guitarists do this too because I've heard them say this. You think of the notes of the melody as the landing places. This is where I'm going to land over the course of the next 4 bars. And how I get there is the improvisation part. I'm going to, the steps my fingers take to get to these 4 notes is up to me and my muscle memory and just winging it. And that's when sometimes you hear notes that are wrong because it's like, oh, my muscle memory glitched out, or I chose to do something that made me land on a note that wasn't the one I was expecting to. And so now I hit a wrong note. So you better repeat it so it's legitimized, right? So just to illustrate one last time, then I'm going to look at the chat. If this is my melody, these are the landing spots. Those are the landing spots, right? But to get there, so the only notes I thought about there was, and all of the other notes I played were muscle memory and embellishments and just noodling, right? So if that helps you feel more confident in, writing melodies and leads, That's how I do it. Now, if you were to take the clip of what I just said or show this YouTube to someone who, has a lot more experience than me, they may have a completely different approach to it. And there are as many different approaches for writing music as there are people writing music, right? There's lots of different schools of thought. Try everything. So, all right. So let me look back in the chat. I saw some tags flash by. Let's see. Hey, Wabbit. Good to see you, buddy. Let's see. Andy says, when playing guitar, I do the same in that I have my favorite patterns, and it's difficult not to use them. Yeah, absolutely. Right. But it's okay to give in to that because they're your patterns, and that's what makes you have a style, right? If I go listen to any of my music from, say, the last 6 months, all the January stuff, I think it sounds like me because of the sounds I select and my muscle memory in the way I play. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But the desire to expand your repertoire and expand your experience, if that leads you to say, okay, I don't want to go to those standard riffs I always play, and you want to try and learn new things or teach your muscles other things or play more intentionally, that's cool too. So I understand what you're saying, Andy. I don't disagree. So Enzo says, I know no instrument. Then learn to play a grid, Enzo. It's a great way to start. Go pick up a Launchpad Pro Mark III for, $200 used or whatever the equivalent is if you can. Buy, beg, steal, and just start there, right? Because it's basically an 8-stringed bass with 8 frets. So, Wabbit says, the 3 notes are the gas station. Everything in between is using your accelerator and brake foot and steering. Yeah, absolutely. Great metaphor, Wabbit. So, Mike Miro Preclick, welcome, or welcome back if you've been before and I don't remember. Sorry about that. Let's see. Just catching up on the chat here. And the wrong notes are rubbernecking. Sure. I know it's expensive buying new synths without selling old ones. But I've seen too many remarks from others that they're sorry they sold the old one. Yeah, I have synths I regret selling for sure. And I've reached a point where I'm trying not to sell anything, or rather I'm trying not to buy something I'm not willing to keep forever. So, we'll see where it goes. Let's see. I have a man cave that still has some space. Yeah, left. Yeah, I have 1 empty rack space, 2 empty. I got a Jasper stand and a 1 tier of a 2-tier stand that have space in them. And I've got 1 more table that's about the size of a Hydra synth over there, although it's got a drum machine and a drone synth on it right now. I have 1 tiny little space for a desktop module about this big. So whatever comes out at Super Booth, if it's this big, I'm going to look at it because it might fill that hole. Right? So it's like modular, right? When your rack has some space in it, you start looking at modules limited by HP. It's like, I've got 12 HP left. Let's just put that in as a filter over on Modular Grid and see what's out there that's 12 HP I can fit in that space. I've been through that cycle a few times. Let's see. Oh yeah, Rich, the K2000. Are you actually selling to Audrey, or is that a wish? All right, let's see. What else? Almost done with the chat here. No desire to keep things I don't use. Homegrown. Are you a minimalist? Or of minimalist tendencies? I went through that phase. It's a good phase. It certainly keeps my stuff clean. Rich, that's exactly what you do on Modular Grid. Yeah, it's like, I got 12 HP left. What'll fit in 12 HP? All right, so let's wipe all this. What time is it? 2:58. All right, I've babbled along. So this is a very instructional one. I did some music at the beginning and doing some now. I'm going to do one last little bit here, and then I got to go because I still have Mother's Day duties to take care of. So, all right, let's start with this bell, and we'll do slightly longer patterns. We'll do 2-bar patterns. It's still pretty short. right? So 32, if you're counting 16ths on a step sequencer, these will be 32 step patterns. Let's start with this. I'm going to bring that down. It's a little loud. And we'll add a dulcimer pattern. And we'll set their level so they blend well. Put a little organ in here. So this is an implied chord progression. My plucks are noodling around in D minor. And my organ's doing this walk down. Where it's going D, C. What's it doing? It's going D, C, B flat, G, I think. D, C, B flat, G. Yeah. Do something with this string pluck. I'm just gonna improvise. I'm not gonna record. I'm just gonna improvise and see how it sounds. That in there. So this bass line's a great example of having landing zones that I'm going to embellish on, because I know what this melody is. That note, D, C, B flat, G. So those are the landing zones for my bass line. because completely I know where my landing zones are, and I'm just going to muscle memory noodle around the landing zones. Quick. I'm going to record a bass line here in a second. Hello, Coil. If you're out, have fun. I'm glad you like the tips. I am way over on time. Let's put a quick bass line down and then a little lead line, and then I'll call it a day. Missed the intro. Missed the clip start. Be 8 bars long. Okay. Let's put bass line in here. Lead over it. Around, we'll record one in. So this lead here is an example of legitimizing the shape of the pattern. I'm playing the same rhythmic phrase for each of the landing zones, but I'm changing the noodling and I'm shifting them around to follow the landing zones. New landing zone, same pattern rhythmically. That is an earworm. That's a hook. You can legitimize your melody that way. You know what? I forgot to turn on the rhythm. had a drum part playing in the background the whole time. I completely forgot. That'll do. Let's slowly bring it in. And we're out. So, all right, guys, gang, ladies. I think that'll do for now. Let's see, where are we at? Miss any final things in the chat? So nice, Les Claypool. That's good company to be in. I am nothing like Les Claypool. He is so amazing. But thank you. Let's see. I Sing the Body Electric. Those arpeggiated sequences. Plucked notes also have a quality of the medieval about them. Because of the sort of the timbre, the dulcimer timbre is going on there, right? Hammered dulcimer for sure. That's an Op 6 synthesizer making that sound. Let's see. Much more. We see greetings, people being kind to each other. That's good. Thanks, Rich. I'm glad you liked it. I think we're good for the day. You can run away. I am going to go do family Mother's Day things. So thanks very much, everybody. Have a good one. I am going to just kill the stream, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.